It is a great pleasure to welcome our guest today, Stevenom Erikson, the author who has left a distinctive mark in the fantasy literature. How does it feel to finish a 10-book series, the one you've been writing for over a decade?
It was a very strange feeling to finish, because I realized that with each book that I wrote, the pressure was building and the fans' expectation was building up to the last 2 books. And I didn't realize I was living under that pressure until I finished the series, and then suddenly this weight just lifted from me. And it was rather surprising to realize that I'd been sort of, I guess, on the run in a sense, being pushed towards the end of that series. And so when it finished, I was simply used up. I was empty inside and exhausted. So.
Thank you. To what extent did situations from real life affect the story and the characters?
I think all books, especially fantasy, are, as you write them, you are in a dialogue with the world you live in. And so if anything was happening in terms of politics or in terms of the environment or anything like that, it found its way into the stories. So as I wrote, I was taking in as much as I could of what was happening in the world and then transforming it through the metaphor into the fantasy world that I was writing in. So every work is a comment on its time when it is written.
Was the development of the plot ever affected or influenced by criticism?
Good question. No, I don't think so. Quite often, I seem to recall with the 4th novel, House of Chains, the 5th, Midnight Tides, and Toll the Hounds especially, the first readings and the first comments from the fans were actually negative. And I realized that if I just waited for a while and they let the book sink in, or maybe even go back and reread, that their views will change on it. And they did, you know. So quite often those books then become the favorites of these people. So I was fairly sure that that the story I was telling was going to have a positive effect on the readers.
What do you think makes your series so great? What was the most difficult part of writing your series Malazan Book of the Fallen, and what was the most enjoyable part?
Oh wow. Well, I don't know if it's great or not. I mean, it's simply written. It's the best I could do over those 12 years. In terms of the most difficult was early on, knowing that, you know, having finished 1 or 2 books, I had 8 more to go, and then 7 more to go. And each one takes me about 8 to 9 months of solid writing. And so when you come to the end of each book, you have a great sense of relief that that one's now done with. I don't have to worry about it anymore, and I can move on to the next one.
The first book of the Carcanas trilogy, called Forge of Darkness, is already out. How is the rest developing?
Well, I've been here for closing on 5 weeks, and I started it when the start of the 2nd book in the trilogy when I came here. And I'm 3 chapters in, and it's rolling along very nicely. So I mean, it is a trilogy, so that's a different structure from a 10-book series. And so I'm bearing that in mind, that this is very much a trilogy.
Do you have the whole development of the story all planned out by now?
The major elements are planned out, but I leave room for spontaneity, because if I mapped everything out, if I took all the notes, I would lose the fire, I would lose the interest in it.
Your books have been described as very realistic, as very complex, and at times grim. How do you see your work, and are you ever surprised by how readers react to it?
Sometimes I am surprised, but the observation that my books are grim always surprises me, because everything I draw in terms of the events in the novels have come from this world. And so nothing that I could have created in that series is anywhere near as grim as things that have happened here in this world. So I'm always surprised when people call them grim. I think I'm more interested now in the new series, the new trilogy, to hear from readers comments regarding the language that I'm using, because it's a different style than the previous series. And so far I've not heard many comments in that regard, so, but that's how it is. I can't predict how the fans react at all.
What is it about fantasy that drew you in initially, and what do you get from fantasy you don't get from other kinds of fiction?
I think my first interest, I wanted to be, when I was a child, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I wanted to dig up dinosaur bones. And then from there it became archaeology and wandering through a landscape in Canada where if you just scrape the surface away, you've taken away human history, and the rest is nothing else. And so wandering, my family used to go out and we'd fish every weekend in lakes and things, and so I was always out in the wilderness. And the notion of how things were in the past really stayed with me and fired my imagination. And so when I began writing, that stayed with me. And what fantasy allows me to do is to explore that whole notion of a mystery in the past, and not have it tied into this world at all. So it could be completely invented on its own, and then it runs by its own rules, but human nature is always the same. And so that has been my interest all along.
Do you think that your book would lend themselves to film adaptation?
They are big books. I'd be very surprised. The only idea I had regarding a film is too radical for any producer to ever pick up. And my idea was each novel is a trilogy of films, and you spend 6 or 7 years filming all of them, and then you release 10 films a year for 3 years. And that's my idea of actually taking what's best in television, which is the serial, weekly returning or whatever, and taking that to film, taking that to the big screen. But whether that ever happens, I mean, it's not likely. It's not likely.
How do you like Opatia? Are you only here for business, or do you have some time to play the tourist?
I have played the tourist, and it's been amazingly relaxed, and that's what I like the best when I'm writing. So I'll sit in places where everyone else is vacationing and in the sun, and I'm in the shade with my laptop in this little sort of bubble of concentration. But I like life active all around me when I'm writing. I don't like a small room or a writer's garret or anything like that. I want to be out in the public space. So it's been excellent. It's been very good.
In closing, is there anything else you would like to share with your fans?
Oh wow. I don't know. I mean, keep reading, and not just me, but just keep reading. It's important to have books still in our world, in our culture, and for all that we have the electronic versions and all the rest, nothing beats holding a book in your hands. And I've just picked up Tim Power's latest novel, and I can't wait to get to it. So,
thank you for your time.
Thank you.